Hello everyone and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Monday, May 27th. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's video will be structured. There will be no recap today since we have not had a video since Friday, but we will start off with the weather report for today. That's just going to be taking a look at any games that do have a double-digit chance of rain or higher for tonight's slate overall. And then after that, we can move over to FanDuel. Talk about my core picks. It's going to be one pitcher, four hitters. It's going to be based on a combination of past performance versus their respective opponent, as well as some recent success. And then after that, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for this afternoon's slate. And that cheat sheet is 100% free. It's up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely be sure to check that out as you're building out your lineups for today's slate. But without further ado, we'll get started with that weather report for today. We're going to start firstly down in Atlanta. 25% chance of rain there before that Braves game between the Braves and the Nationals. So one that we'll be keeping an eye on. Don't really expect too much to change or any postponement or anything else like that. Then we get out to New York with the Mets and the Dodgers. 70% chance of rain. So this is one that you really need to keep an eye on for tonight's slate overall. Not too many guys that I'm really trying to play out of this game in general. It mainly would be like a Dodgers stack, but maybe it's just a game that we straight up try to avoid at least early on. We'll see if anything does change in a positive way with the weather as the day moves along, though. But with that being said, it's really just those two games for today overall. So the Braves we'll keep an eye out on, and then the Mets and the Dodgers, probably a little less optimistic that game ultimately ends up going off. If it does, great. But if it doesn't, it's probably a game that we'd like to avoid just in general for today's slate overall. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about those core picks for tonight's slate. So I am going to start off by saying that the core picks that I have for today, there's not a long list of history for a lot of these players, a lot of these matchups for tonight overall. So kind of feel free to mix and match as you see fit. But I'm going to start off at the pitcher position with Charlie Morton, $9,700. Going against the Washington Nationals tonight, pretty good matchup for him. Got some pretty good history versus them in the past. Oddly enough, last year, his only start that he had against Washington, he had 6 points, though. He only pitched one inning in that game. Not sure if that was a weather thing or, like a little bit of a health scare or not. I didn't dig too deep into that. But it's not like he pitched bad in that inning whatsoever. So if we kind of look at what he's done so far on this season, he's got 3 wins, a 3.35 ERA, coming off a really strong performance. I believe that game was against the Chicago Cubs as well, after a not-so-great performance versus the Cubs earlier in that. So Charlie Morton, he's up there in age, but he's pitching pretty well once again. Not a lot of pitchers that I love on tonight's slate. I kind of like Lance Lynn, but the game's in Cincinnati. The wind's blowing out, so probably a little bit too risky there. A guy that is predominantly a fastball pitcher and is a little bit of a fly ball pitcher too at times as well. So that is one that may be a little bit more risky, but if you want to get to some Lance Lynn, you could definitely do it. The other guy, my cheat sheet, is actually Austin Gomber pitching in Coors Field, so that is another risky one there as well. So I felt like Charlie Morton was at least the safest one for our core picks today. Then at first base at $2,700, we got Paul Goldschmidt. And maybe you're thinking Paul Goldschmidt, maybe he's washed at this point in time. He hasn't done too good this season. He's 222 average, 6 home runs, 21 RBIs on the season, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game, but he's only $2,700. Got some pretty good history versus Nick Lodolo in the past. 3 for 5 with 1 home run versus Lodolo. Kind of the biggest thing last year and at the beginning of this year is Goldschmidt has kind of struggled against that fastball. He's been hitting breaking balls pretty well, at least at the end of last year. And I think that's moved over to this year as well. Lodolo is a guy that is going to throw a couple more breaking balls just in general, so maybe he relies on that a little bit. Lodolo is also coming back from a groin injury, so we'll see how deep he pitches into this game. And then if we look at what Goldschmidt's done as of late, he has at least 1 hit in 12 out of his last 13 games. 5 of those games have been multi-hit games. He's got 4 home runs during that time span, including 2 yesterday as well. So on a pretty good hot streak after a really, really slow start to the season. So why not Paul Goldschmidt today at $2,700? And then we're going to move down to Manny Machado at $3,200. Another guy that you could argue has kind of been off to a slow start, 235 average, 5 home runs, 28 RBIs on the season. That one is kind of explained because he did have the elbow surgery prior to the year. Was DHing at the beginning of the year. He's playing a little bit in the field now, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game, $3,200. 2 for 3 versus Trevor Rogers in his career, the expected starting pitcher for the Miami Marlins. He's on a modest 5-game hitting streak. One of those games has been a multi-hit game, so not maybe as much upside as we like out of a typical Manny Machado, but we're also only playing $3,200 for him. So, but if we can get double-digit points, 15 points, home run out of him, it's going to look like a pretty solid play for today's slate overall. And then next, we're going to get to the one that's a little bit more risky. We got Andrew Monasterio for the Milwaukee Brewers. You can see he's eligible at a lot of different positions, so second base, third base, shortstop. averaging under 6 fantasy points per game on the season. It's a 154 average, 1 home run, 2 RBIs. He really hasn't done too much this year, hasn't played in a lot of games or anything else like that. He's only $2,200 though. He's expected to lead off on pretty much all accounts for the Brewers this afternoon. He's going against Justin Steele. He's 3 for 6 for him in his career, so that's kind of what we're leaning on. He's a cheap play. If you don't like him, just don't play him, but I think he was a guy that was worth mentioning for today's slate overall. And then last but not least, we got a player from the opposite end of that game. It's Ian Happ. He's $2,900. Another guy that hasn't had the greatest start to the year either. 224 average, 4 home runs, 17 RBIs, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game. $2,900. No history in the past versus Robert Gasser. Robert Gasser is a left-handed pitcher. Typically in my mind, I'm thinking Ian Happ typically hits left-handed pitching pretty well. Digging a little bit deeper into it, this year hasn't been quite the case. But if you look at what he's done lately, he has at least 1 hit in the last 4 games that he has started. 2 of those have been multi-hit games, and he did hit 2 home runs yesterday. So maybe it's a little bit of point chasing, but I just get the feel that it's going to be a good matchup for Ian Happ, although he's never seen Robert Gasser in the past. So maybe this is kind of a get-right spot just in general for Ian Happ. Maybe he's just kind of on this roll, and, he's a guy when he gets hot, you kind of want to play him in a little bit of bunches. So why not Ian Happ for today's slate? But with that being said, if you go with these 5 players that I do have listed here, once again, no pressure there to do it because I think there's just not that much history out there for a lot of these guys today. Mix and match as you do see fit, but you would have $14,300 remaining, just under $3,600 per player. So a good amount of money remaining to pay up. Whether you want to pay up for a Shohei Ohtani, a Marcell Ozuna, somebody like that, or, if you want to go a little bit more balanced to brush the rest away from here, guys right around that $3,600 price range. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. So typically, especially in these smaller slates, I usually end up with like 2 or 3 teams. Not the case today. So I listed 5 here. Once again, no pressure because there's not that much history, but I do see some upside with all 5 of these teams. Obviously, the Dodgers, if that game ultimately ends up going off between them and the Mets. But we'll start off with the San Diego Padres. They're going against Trevor Rogers of the Miami Marlins. He has not pitched great so far to start the year. Some of their hitters have faced him before in the past and have decent history. It's Manny Machado is kind of the main one. If you want to go with like a revenge game narrative, if you really want to with Luis Ariz, you could. I don't really think Miami did much to upset him, but if you want to go with that narrative, it's always a fun one, I guess, and not one that I particularly buy into too much, though. In terms of the Dodgers, going against Tyler McGill today of the New York Mets, if that game ultimately does end up going off. Freddie Freeman is the guy that has really good history versus him in the past, 4 for 6. The rest of the team, not so much, but it is a very, very limited sample size. Then we have the Atlanta Braves going against Mitchell Parker. He has not pitched against them in the past, so there's no history there. But some of these Braves hitters typically at left-handed pitching pretty well. Your Marcell Ozuna, Adam Duvall, Travis d'Arnaud. Those are the guys that typically at left-handed pitching pretty well. So if you want to go out there, if you want to play them, definitely does make a little bit of sense. And then we got both sides of the Cubs and Brewers game. So no history in the past versus Robert Gasser, obviously for the Cubs team. And then on the Brewers side, Justin Steele. Hasn't been Justin Steele this year, so I do like getting into some Brewers today. There are some Brewers that have hit him pretty well in the past. Monasterio was 3 for 6. Christian Yelich 8 for 21. I think William Contreras was 3 for 10. And then Willie Adames does have 2 home runs versus Justin Steele in the past as well. So there is some upside to be had there with that Brewers lineup overall. They do throw a couple weird guys in there typically against left-handed pitching. So there's a couple cheap options if you really want to get there as well. But with that being said, that's what I do have in terms of the weather report, the core picks, and my top GPP stacks for today's slate overall. As always, if you have any questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And then, as always, I'll be listing any updates down in the comments, as well as the starting lineups as they do get announced throughout the early afternoon, since we are on the earlier slate for today overall. And it should make for a pretty good one just in general. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking it out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, we have MLB DFS in terms of the core pick video Monday through Friday. And then I do have a UFL DFS video that comes out once a week that typically comes out on Fridays. So definitely be sure to check that out if that's something you're into as well. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and BetUS. If you are a brand new user to any one of those 3 sites, when you sign up, you make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Prize Picks and Parlay Play, it's a 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's 125% match up to $2,500. So some pretty great opportunities to be had out there. And then with that being said, if you have any other additional questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comments or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for today's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS.